Hey everyone, tonight we're diving into the blistering, soot-covered world of a man who didn't just survive the Middle Ages, he forged it. Quite literally, the blacksmith. Now you've probably seen them glamorized in films. Slow motion, hammers crashing down on glowing metal, sparks soaring like fireworks, all set to a swelling soundtrack. But let's set the record straight. Real blacksmithing in medieval times was about as glamorous as a toothache. It was punishing, back-breaking, scorchingly hot labor that left you burnt, battered, and exhausted. And that's on a good day. Before we get started, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy this kind of immersive storytelling. And tell me in the comments where in the world you're watching from and what time it is for you. I love seeing our little global night shift come together. Now, let the fire crackle, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan to add a bit of ambient. Forge, hum, and settle in. Because tonight, you are stepping into the life of a medieval blacksmith. Not just any blacksmith, but one born into the soot-streaked legacy of generations who lived and died beside the anvil. Forget noble titles, silk sheets, or inherited land. You've inherited the forge. From the moment you stop crawling long enough not to tumble into an open fire pit, you're already expected to help. And by the age of 6, congratulations, you're officially your father's apprentice. That's the medieval term for unpaid child laborer with zero rights, a face permanently smudged with soot and the muscle tone of a much older farmhand. Your toys? Tongs and scrap iron. Your playground? A dirt floor beside a furnace, hot enough to singe your eyelashes off just by looking at it. While the other village kids are chasing chickens and pretending sticks are swords, you're learning how not to die next to molten metal. Fun games in your world include guess how hot this is with your bare hand. Hold this hammer until your shoulders cry, and try not to cry when you ruin the nail for the 4th time. Your father, the local blacksmith and your unrelenting taskmaster, is built like a brick wall, communicates primarily through grunts, glares, and the phrase, "hit it harder," and has hands so callous they could double as armor. He teaches you everything, not gently, not patiently, but thoroughly. How to shape iron, how to manage the fire, how to swallow your pride when a nobleman mocks your work. Asking questions is a risky business. Most of the time, it earns you a flying tool and a week of being ignored. As for holidays, nice dream. The forge doesn't take time off, and neither do you. There's always something to fix, to sharpen, to reforge. Free time is just what you call the 5 minutes between tasks when you're not being barked at to stoke the fire or restack coal. So yes, you're technically learning a trade, but in reality, you're being trained in heat tolerance, blister management, and the fine art of falling asleep standing up. By 10, you already smell permanently of scorched metal. You swear like a drunken miner, and your arms are strong enough to carry buckets heavier than your missing dog, the one that ran off 2 years ago, presumably because it couldn't take the noise anymore. This is your destiny now. Welcome to the family business, where the inheritance is 70 years of spinal damage, a tunic soaked in smoke, and the endless echo of hammer on steel. You might think childhood would buy you a few years of breathing room. Nope. In the blacksmith's world, childhood is more of a passing rumor than an actual phase. The moment you can lift a bucket without falling over, you're conscripted. Your concept of playtime is trying not to catch on fire. Your jungle gym is a rack of tongs beside a bed of glowing coals. Take one wrong step and you'll learn just how long skin can sizzle before anyone notices. Your official title might be apprentice, but your real role is do every awful job nobody else wants to and get yelled at anyway. You pump the bellows, sweep the soot-caked floor, clean the ash-covered tools, carry firewood, sort coal, and pray that nothing sharp or flaming falls on your face. And all that's before breakfast, your wages. A hard chunk of bread, a faint nod of approval, and an occasional grunt from your father that roughly translates to, "You didn't completely ruin that." That's considered high praise. Meanwhile, the other children, your old playmates, are outside, learning how to till the earth or milk goats. You envy them. Even if they reek of cheese and manure, at least they're not getting branded by accident. They'll grow into farmers or shepherds, simple, honest work. You're making nails by hand, hundreds of them, bent, twisted, cursed, reheated, hammered again. If you're lucky, your father will let you swing the hammer on your own. That is, right after he finishes pointing out everything you're doing wrong. And heaven forbid you say, "I'm tired." That phrase doesn't exist in your world. Tired is for the weak. Burnout is for candles. You don't stop, you don't complain. You keep swinging, sweating, and trying not to sob in front of your dad. Because in his eyes, you're no longer a child. You're an apprentice blacksmith. And the forge is now your entire world. It seeps into your skin, shapes your muscles, and rewires your brain. By the time you hit your teenage years, the forge doesn't feel like a place anymore. It feels like a creature, a hot, smoky, unpredictable beast that needs to be fed, managed, and feared. You can recognize its moods by sound alone. The breath of the bellows, the hiss of steam, the clang of metal echoing like a battlefield drum. Your body learns to move in time with it, instinctively responding to its rhythm, whether you're wide awake or half asleep on your feet. The heat no longer shocks you, not because you're immune to it, but because you've accepted it. Like gravity or taxes, you instinctively know which stones are too hot to sit on, which coals burn the quickest, and which corners of the forge are secretly plotting to melt your feet. Your skin is dark, not from sun, but from soot. Your clothes never change. The same crusty tunic and stiff leather apron, steeped in the stench of scorched wool, oil, and despair. You don't own much. You have the forge, not legally, of course. Your father still runs it, but emotionally, spiritually, physically, it owns you. Silence becomes a foreign concept. The hiss, the clang, the crackle, they're constant. When they stop, it feels eerie. You twitch like a musician who just missed a beat in a song they've played every day for a decade. Friends, if you still have any, they've mostly given up. "He's probably at the forge," becomes your tagline. You're no longer just a blacksmith. You are the forge, a walking, sweating extension of iron and fire. And oddly, a part of you starts to love it. Not the burns, not the aching joints, but that fleeting, magical moment when you get it right. When the curve is perfect, when the horseshoe fits, when the blade shines like a mirror. For one brief second, you're not a child covered in soot. You're a creator, a maker, an indispensable cog in the machine of medieval survival. Then that moment ends. Another order comes in. The fire roars again. Time to work. While your peers are still stretching into adolescence, clumsily growing into their bodies, you've already been bent, blistered, and battered into shape. Their muscles are forming. Yours are already worn out. You're not growing stronger, you're growing stiffer. Your arms are thick, but not like a heroic knight, more like someone who's been arm wrestling anvils since birth. Your back, a mess, bent from years of leaning over fire and lifting heavy iron. Your knees click, your shoulders pop, and your hands, ah yes, your hands. Let's talk about those next. Now you have iron-tipped claws. Your hands have transformed into something unrecognizable. Blistered, cracked, and dyed a permanent shade of grime, so deep even the sacred waters of the Nile couldn't scrub it out. Every joint screams with wear, and each digit carries a fresh souvenir. A slice from a jagged shard, a searing kiss from red-hot iron, or a bruise from a tool that fought back. Half your fingernails are gone, while the rest look like they've been dug from volcanic ash. When someone hands you bread, you don't just grab it. You cradle it like it's made of shattered glass and curses, every motion calculated to avoid igniting the agony in your knuckles. There's no pause button, No healing time. Pull a muscle. Too bad. Keep swinging. Twist your wrist, switch arms and carry on. The forge has no pity for weakness. Iron doesn't wait for your elbow to stop throbbing or for your back to unknot itself. The fire won't pause because your knees are buckling, and rest, don't count on it. Even after 12 hours of hammering, lifting, twisting, hauling, you lie in bed and find no peace. Your limbs are too sore to find comfort. Your ears still echo with the day's relentless percussion. Your arms twitch and jerk, haunted by phantom blows thrown in your sleep, as if your dreams have picked up where your shift left off. You wake in new and creative places every morning. You don't just smell like smoke, you reek of it, like pain given physical form. Even your pain carries its own smaller, secondary pain. And your father, he grunts in approval. Good, you're learning, he says without turning his head. And oddly enough, you are. Not in spite of the agony, but because of it. You're being sculpted, hardened like the iron you temper. Heat, pressure, repetition, again and again, until you're something. More than you were. But make no mistake, by the time most boys are stepping into manhood, you feel like you've already lived 2 full lives and died halfway through both. And the worst part, this is only the beginning. In most professions, smoke is a hazard. In yours, it's a colleague, and not a pleasant one. The forge doesn't just generate heat, it breathes it. It exhales a choking, grimy soup of ash, soot, and despair with every flicker of its flames. Each breath is seasoned with powdered rust, singed iron, scorched oil, and the vague smell of something you're not sure should be burning. If you're lucky enough to see more than 6 feet ahead of you, it's because someone forgot to light the forge properly. Visibility is a luxury. Airflow is a fantasy. There's no chimney to speak of, just a crude hole in the ceiling that leaks more smoke in than it lets out. Windows, a joke. The only things your forge has are blackened walls, your father's constant coughing, and the occasional gust of wind that whips the smoke directly into your face like it holds a personal grudge. Your lungs? Let's just say they've accepted a toxic marriage with your workspace. In the beginning, the smoke burns, then it itches, then it just becomes part of you. Coughing fits become a daily rhythm. You produce black mucus, not ideal, but at least it's consistent. You've grown so used to poisoned air that clean, fresh wind makes you nervous like something's off. Even your voice has changed. It now rasps like an old goat herder gargling hot gravel. Talking feels like dragging a rake over your vocal cords. Your throat hosts a permanent dust storm. Your breath comes in wheezes, and your speech sounds like it's been sandpapered. But you keep going. You must. You don't breathe to live, you breathe to keep hammering. And it's not just the smoke. There's the metal dust from grinding, the acrid fumes from quenching hot iron in oil, and the pungent stench of whatever unlucky substance happened to fall into the fire. Bits of cloth, leather, or sometimes even bone. Before midday, you've probably inhaled a cocktail of at least 3 different slow-acting poisons. Protective gear. If you're lucky, a damp rag tied around your face, which quickly turns into a sweaty, reeking mess that somehow smells worse than the forge itself. Eventually, even that comes off. The trade-off? A slightly easier breath, just one laced with more ash than dignity. Of course, you know what all this means. Long-term consequences, chronic cough, shortened breath, possibly asthma, definitely black lung. Early death isn't just a risk, it's penciled into the schedule. But you're not thinking about that. You're thinking about that crooked hinge you need to redo before your father notices it's off by half an inch. In your world, air isn't a right, it's an obstacle. By now, your tools have become companions. If your companions were unforgiving, heavy and occasionally malicious, your hammer, it might as well be part of your arm. You've used it so much, it's reshaped your skeleton. You've cursed it, blessed it, whispered to it under your breath. Your shoulder clicks ominously now, like a maraca filled with broken bones every time you lift it. But without it, You're nothing. Just another sweaty, angry man standing alone. In a box of smoke, the hammer gives you purpose and frequent bruises. The tongs are even worse. Slippery, clumsy, too hot or not hot enough. Always managing to bite your fingers just when you're trying to be careful. You've scorched your fingertips so many times you've lost count. The iron slips, you fumble, you curse. Your father yells, "Hold it like you mean it." You briefly fantasize about throwing the tongs into the fire just to watch them suffer. Your chisel? A ghost of what it once was. The edge is mostly gone, dulled by endless shaping, splitting, scraping, and the occasional emergency lockpick session when your neighbor locks themselves out again. Your bench is a chaotic graveyard of tools. Files, awls, punches, rivet sets. It resembles a medieval torture rack, and in many ways it is. You've been stabbed, pinched, crushed, and sliced by every one of them. Your fingers flinch at the sight of anything new. They've developed trauma responses. Your hands have their own version of PTSD. Your apron was supposed to protect you. It tries in its own awful way, mostly by catching every molten spark and holding it right against your ribs like a fiery embrace. It's more charred than whole now, with the leather hardened in patches like frozen meat. Every winter it stiffens into a grim shield of scars and soot. But still, you care for your tools like they're family. You clean them, sharpen them, line them up with reverence, because if one breaks, your entire world comes to a halt. No hammer, no coin, no bread. So yes, your tools are your life, but don't be fooled. They've also declared a quiet, daily war on your joints, nerves, and sanity. Every time you pick them up, they whisper, "We help you survive, but we will also slowly break you." And you nod back and say, "Fair enough. Now pass the damn hammer. You don't wear a crown. You don't carry a sword. You don't command troops or inspire poems. But without you, the village would fall apart by Tuesday. You're the blacksmith, savior of the bent and broken, the unsung keystone of society. You are the medieval equivalent of tech support, emergency services, construction, repairs, and customer complaints, all in one soot-covered, sleep-deprived package. The knight? He needs a new sword. You make it. The farmer? His plough broke. You fix it. The monk's bell cracked, the baker's oven won't shut, the shepherd's gate won't latch. Who gets called? You. Every time they arrive at your door, uninvited, muddy, and full of misplaced urgency. "I know you're busy," they begin, "but could you just, those 4 cursed words, could you just, the anthem of your suffering." And even after you bend, twist, and burn yourself fixing their problems, there's no thank you. Just a nod, a grunt, and the smug assumption that you were born to serve. That repairing their rusted chamber pot at dusk is a privilege. Payment, often a gamble, sometimes coin, sometimes a bag of onions, sometimes a promise so vague it evaporates by next market day. One man paid you with a dead chicken. He said it was good for soup. It wasn't. You're also everyone's go-to fixer for problems that are no concern of yours. A cracked knife from a drunken brawl. You repair it. A bent gate from someone sitting on it too hard. You hammer it straight. An unknown metal object that might be part of something important or might be scrap. You're expected to magically divine its purpose and restore it. Yet when praise comes around, it's never you they talk about. It's the knight, the priest, the miller with his smug, oversized, "Go to you?" Your background noise, a walking utility. A reliable hand, not a name. But here's the secret. You know as well as they do, they couldn't last a week without you. Their fields would grind to a halt, their homes would begin to splinter and crumble, and their horses would limp about, unshod. They may never sing your name in ballads or carve it into stone, but make no mistake, their quiet, everyday world is held together by the strength of your hands and the fire of your forge. Peace, for most people, is a blessing. No raiders darkening the horizon, no bandits lurking along the roads. No panicked nobleman demanding a polished new sword by sundown, but for you, peace is a curse, because you are the blacksmith. And while you may shape hinges, plows, and cooking spits, what truly keeps your forge alive, what truly feeds your family is war. When swords are drawn and tempers flare, you become indispensable. Soldiers need blades. Archers need arrowheads by the hundreds. Knights demand helmets, shields, and horseshoes, especially since they wear down twice as fast when galloping into a panicked charge. During war, your forge becomes a furnace of activity. The flames burn high. The clanging of your hammer becomes a battle cry of its own. The coin flows faster. You may collapse from exhaustion, but your stomach is full, and for once, you're not ducking the alehouse over unpaid debts. But then the fighting stops. A truce is signed. The knights return to their castles, and the lords stop yelling. The orders dry up overnight. No more swords, no more shields, just a farmer with a blunt sickle asking if you can sharpen it, and maybe take 3 onions instead of coin. Sure, you can switch back to making the household goods. A kettle here, a door hinge there, maybe a set of cooking hooks, but those jobs barely cover the cost of the charcoal you burn. Everyone still expects you to work with the skill of a master magician, but they want to pay you like a boy who mucks out the stables. You find yourself negotiating like a merchant, pleading like a beggar, and heaven forbid you raise your prices. People look at you like you've placed a curse on their livestock. Oh, come now, they say. You're just hammering metal, as if iron bends itself into shape while singing church hymns, as if making a clean edge on a sword or a tight joint on a door latch doesn't require years of craft, muscle, and patience. You start to miss the chaos, not the bloodshed or the smoke-filled skies, but the rhythm of war, the certainty. When you had knights lining up with dented shields and jangling coin purses, you had value. You had purpose. Now, you're fixing rusted locks for doors no one locks, patching broken pots that should have been melted down years ago, mending tools that belong in a museum, not a field. Peace for the villagers brings comfort and calm. For you, it brings hunger and anxiety. And though you'd never dare say it aloud, a quiet voice in the back of your mind whispers, a little. Skirmish wouldn't hurt, just a minor border dispute. Because when weapons break, you eat. Some jobs have clean endings. A cart is built, a roof repaired, a song sung and applauded. Then you rest, satisfied. Not so for the blacksmith. Your work never ends. Not today, not tomorrow, not even in your sleep. Fix one gate hinge and a wagon wheel breaks. Finish a batch of nails and someone immediately arrives, demanding a dozen more and longer this time. And by the way, they can't pay until after the harvest. Your day starts before the rooster. It ends long after the moon has risen. And when you finally do collapse into your straw-stuffed sack of a bed, your mind keeps hammering, replaying the day's rhythm of fire and steel. You dream of bellows and sparks, of that one customer who still owes you a half-dozen eggs and a word of thanks. Even the simple jobs become tests of patience. A villager shuffles in with a mangled rake. Just needs a quick fix, they say. But you know what that means. 2 hours of reshaping warped metal, reheating brittle tines, hammering it back to life while they stand there asking every 5 minutes, is it ready yet? And when, by some miracle, you find a moment to sit, to sip something that isn't ash-tainted or tepid, your apprentice bursts in with urgent news. The friar's horse has thrown a shoe. You need to take care of it, of course you do, because you're the blacksmith. And in this village, that means you're everyone's last resort. The forge is always hungry. It demands your attention like a jealous god. Leave it too long and the fire fades, the bellows crack, the tools rust. Your anvil shifts in the heat of summer, your bellows stiffen in the cold of winter. Nothing ever rests. Everything teeters on the edge of falling apart. Even Sundays, the one day meant for rest, become work days. Technically, you're not supposed to lift a hammer, But if an ox cart wheel snaps on the road to market, suddenly, there you are, in your soot-stained apron, praying the priest doesn't pass by while you're swearing and smacking iron on the Lord's Day. You don't bother with a to-do list. That would imply you could finish anything. But blacksmithing isn't a job you complete. It's a cycle. Work, repair, repeat, until your hammer breaks or your body does. And the maddening part? You love it. You truly do. Despite the grind, the heat, the soot, there's something deeply satisfying about reshaping raw, stubborn metal into something useful, something that lasts. You'd think all that effort would at least earn you two simple rewards, a hearty meal and a full night's sleep. But in your world, food and rest are luxuries, like hot baths or customers who knock politely. Let's talk about food. You burn through more energy in a single day than a farmhand running across a field. And what do you get for it? A hunk of coarse, crusty bread, a cold bowl of watery pottage that might still contain yesterday's turnip. And if you're very lucky, and it's a feast day, you might get a scrap of salted pork. But it isn't. You eat on your feet, one hand still gripping the tongs, the other shielding your meal from the forge's falling ash. Mealtimes aren't moments of rest, they're interruptions. Conversations become grunts, and if someone knocks mid-bite because their latch won't close, that stew, it's going cold. Again. You don't eat for pleasure, you eat to keep going. Food in, hammer out. And sleep, that's a cruel joke. By the time you stumble into bed, your hands are swollen and aching. Your back feels like it's been kicked by a mule. Your ears still echo with the day's iron music. Your bed is a sack of straw that's either lumpy, flat, or home to something that crawls. Your blanket is an itchy, scorched wool rag that smells faintly of forge smoke, stale ale, and quiet despair. And just when you begin to drift off, your mind reawakens, reminding you of that unfinished order, that cracked hinge, or that customer who never paid for the wagon wheel you fixed 3 weeks ago. You don't sleep. You negotiate with exhaustion. You toss and turn, calculating how long you can delay repairs before someone is pounding on your door at dawn. And there are always surprises. A storm might rip a shutter loose. A noble may suddenly require his sword sharpened before a dawn hunt. Or a neighbor's horse might toss a shoe in the middle of the night. Because clearly you don't need rest, so you survive on scraps, stolen bites of food, half naps stolen at the edge of consciousness, and sheer, unshakable stubbornness. In your world, productivity always comes before comfort, deadlines before dreams. Sleep and food aren't rewards. They're brief intermissions between hammer swings. You eat when you can, you sleep when you're allowed, and you pray the fire doesn't die while you're dreaming. Once, long ago, your hands were soft. You remember that? Barely. Perhaps when you were a child. Now they are something else entirely. Not hands, but tools, hardened, cracked, swollen, calloused beyond feeling. They are so ruined that you can barely grip a quill, let alone lace your own boots. But still, they work, and as long as they work, the village works too. Because you are the blacksmith, and everything depends on you. But when you've been burned as many times as you have, the pain just becomes background noise. You grab red-hot tongs with the nonchalance of someone who's long since stopped flinching. It's not bravery anymore. It's muscle memory dulled by years of suffering. Your hands are wrecked. Every joint in your fingers clicks when you move, like rusted hinges groaning under weight. Your knuckles look like they've been mugged by a hammer and left for dead. Your palms, a battlefield layered with blisters so old and new they look like a geological cross-section. You could count the seasons by them. 5 blisters, that's summer. 10, a hard winter with no gloves. You've lost fingernails more times than you can remember. Some peeled off clean, others clung on until the bitter end, tearing as they left. One time you smashed your thumb so bad it turned a deep, angry black and stayed that way for 2 weeks. You didn't stop. You just switched hands and grunted more than usual. Injuries are part of the rhythm now. Sharp edges bite you when you're careless. Files nip your skin like irritable dogs. And the iron, oh, the iron, it never forgets a mistake. Every week something new leaks blood. You don't even pause. Just wrap it in a scrap of grimy cloth, mutter a few curse words, and keep hammering. But it's the burns that really teach you. Some are small, quick zaps that sting and vanish. Others, they hiss, bubble, and etch themselves into your skin like brands from a vengeful god. You've branded yourself so many times you might as well be livestock. And you've made peace with it. You're not even angry anymore. It's just the cost of doing business. The only thing that's improved is your grip. You can crush a walnut like it owes you rent, but your dexterity's gone. Your fingers tremble in the cold and drop things they used to dance with. You're 30, but your hands belong to a 70-year-old knight who's lost 3 wars and now gambles for stew in a smoky tavern. Still, those ruined hands are the only reason there's food on your table. They shape blades, mend hinges, and wield the hammer that built your name. They throb with every heartbeat, but they get the job done. Because in this life, it doesn't matter how broken you are, as long as you can still swing. And let's be honest, your scent isn't winning any admirers. Clean? You haven't smelled truly clean since you were 5. The day you became your father's apprentice, your odor changed forever. It settled into something between an unwashed ashtray and burnt bacon, marinated in despair. Welcome to the blacksmith's life, where the scent of fire becomes your second skin. The forge blazes from dawn to dusk, and so do you. The smoke seeps into everything, your tunic, your hair, your pores. Even your sweat has changed. It doesn't smell like sweat anymore. It's closer to the scent of smoked meat left out in the sun. Technically, you could bathe, but why bother? The water's always cold, and by the time the sun's up, you're already covered in soot, grease, and coal dust. A bath would be wasted by breakfast. Your clothes aren't helping either. You wear the same scorched tunic and leather apron every single day. They haven't been clean since the last town festival, if you can even call that clean. Someone spilled ale on you before noon, and now they just hang from your body like a shell of crusted grime. Forget perfume. It dies within minutes. Flowers wilt when you pass. Bread goes stale faster. Cats hiss from shadows, and people, they notice. When you walk into the tavern, the crowd splits like a miracle. The innkeeper doesn't need a hint. He seats you near the window, if not outside. Not to be kind, just so others can breathe. No one wants to sit next to a man who smells like a burned fence post with opinions. But you take it in stride. Better to be noticed than ignored. They still whisper, "That's the blacksmith." Half respect, half nasal distress. You might not be charming, but you're unforgettable. Because if you smell like smoke, it means you've been forging. If you smell like iron, it means you've been crafting. And if you reek like leather soaked in soot and old regrets, well, that just means you're a professional. This wasn't your dream. You didn't choose the forge. The forge chose you, through your father's blistered hands and the weight of expectations handed down like a rusty heirloom. And now, the cycle begins again. Your son doesn't chase butterflies in the fields. He fetches coal. He pumps the bellows. He holds red-hot iron while sparks rain down and you mutter, "Don't flinch." He's maybe 7, but already smells like scorched metal and wet burlap. You feel a flicker of guilt, but it's quickly smothered. This isn't cruelty. It's preparation. This is how you survive. He watches you lift the hammer and stares the way you once stared at your own father, wide-eyed, torn between awe and fear. You remember that look, back when your father was a mountain and you didn't understand the cracks in his foundation. Now you know, he wasn't carved from stone, just held together by fatigue and obligation. So you teach the boy everything. How to read metal by color, how to tap gently, not swing wildly, how to listen to the hiss and hum of steel. You yell, sometimes not from anger but habit. Hold it right, that's too cold. Stop crying, it's just a burn. You try to soften things when you can. A bedtime story by the hearth, a slice of dried fruit when the coin allows. But tenderness is fleeting in a place where the fire never sleeps. There's too much work. His hands will soon mirror yours. His back will ache before his voice changes. He'll learn to sleep through ringing ears and wake without being called. He'll outgrow his shirt, but not the scars. And when your own body finally gives out, when your knees refuse to bend, your shoulders lock, your lungs rattle, he'll lift the hammer you can no longer hold. People might shake their heads, say it's unfair, that the cycle should end. But this is how it has always been. A lineage forged in smoke, shaped by steel, bound by sweat. You're not just handing down a trade, you're passing down a fire that refuses to die. So yes, you raise your son to take your place, not out of cruelty, out of necessity. Someone has to keep the fire going. You've spent a lifetime standing too close to flame, breathing in soot and swinging iron until your bones forgot how to rest. It was never a question of if your body would break, just when. And now that moment has arrived. Your knees creak like old barn doors in a thunderstorm. Your spine is warped like heat-warped metal. Your fingers, once strong enough to shape steel, now tremble when holding a wooden spoon. The forge still burns bright, but your arms stay still. The hammer grows heavier by the day, almost as if it knows it will soon be passed on. There's no dramatic farewell. No song will be sung, no heroic tale will be carved into stone. You simply slow down. You hand off more tasks. You sit longer. You watch more. Your son asks questions, and for the first time you struggle to remember the answers. The villagers still nod when they see you, but they speak to him now. He's the one with fresh burns. The weight of the craft has shifted, quietly, inevitably, to newer shoulders, and you, battered, soot-covered and aching, feel something close to peace. You were never rich, never noble. You had no land, no books, no luxuries, but you mattered. You were the fire that shaped the tools, the hands that bent iron to will, the name spoken with a mix of gratitude and grimace. And now, you're the legacy that keeps the forge alive. You kept swords sharp, wheels turning, gates swinging, and the farms alive with motion. You were the heartbeat beneath the village's clamor, the hands that made motion possible. No one praised you often, but everything moved because of you. And still, you likely won't live to see 50. Most blacksmiths don't. The years pile on like slag at your feet, lungs blackened from the endless smoke, joints worn down like blades against whetstone, heart weary from decades of heat, hammering and grit. But even after you're gone, your work endures. Nails in the church doors, blades sheathed at the hips of lords, horses shod and ready to ride at a moment's notice. You leave behind no titles, no banners, no grand tales, only tools, scars, and a son who inherits your hammer. And in your world, that legacy is more than enough. They may bury you without gold, without ceremony, just a simple grave, a name carved into wood, and a forge that still burns in memory. No statue stands in your honor, but the ringing of hammer. On anvil long after your death, that is your song. You were never a knight, never galloped into battle with banners flying, never wore polished armor that shimmered in the sun. But you made that armor. You didn't till the soil, but your hands shaped the plows that carved it. You didn't bake the bread, but the ovens were sealed by your fire and steel. You didn't build the castle walls, but every nail driven into timber, every hinge fitted to a gate, bore your heat and hammer. You were a blacksmith, and in the medieval world that meant everything. While nobles quarreled and crowns changed heads, you stood firm by your fire. Day after day, year after year, you didn't shape politics, you shaped the world itself, one piece at a time. Rivets, buckles, braces, hooks, nothing flashy, nothing that drew applause, just the quiet essentials that held civilization together. Your life was filled with noise, the clang, the hiss, the roar of flame. But your legacy is a whisper. No, Minstrels sang of your tongs. No poems praised your forge. Yet every unbroken wheel, every sword that didn't shatter, every barn door that opened without a sound, those were your verses. Those were your legacy. Passers-by saw only smoke and soot. They wrinkled their noses and walked on. But inside your forge, there was a symphony, an orchestra of fire and steel, of endurance and creation. You didn't just forge metal. You forged civilization. One horseshoe, one blade, one nail at a time. And though your hands are now still, your flame has not died. Your son hefts your hammer. Your grandson learns the language of heat and steel. Your name may fade from the records, but the things you made pass from hand to hand, bearing the weight of your memory. You were never crowned, never celebrated, but without you, nothing moved. No carts rolled, no gates closed, no armies marched. You were the quiet foundation of history, the ember beneath the grand stories, and that, though rarely said aloud, matters more than gold or glory. In a world of timber, stone, and muscle, you were the fire, the hidden spark that transformed. Raw ore into movement, into progress, into civilization itself. You weren't just part of the world, you kept it turning. Long before alchemy came to be associated with mysterious European laboratories and hooded figures hunched over glass flasks, it was something far more sacred, far more ancient. Its origin wasn't in the castles of medieval scholars, but in the sun-scorched lands of ancient Egypt. There, transformation wasn't merely science, it was divinity, it was life itself. The Egyptians had a word for this sacred art, chemia. It came from chem, the name they gave to their soil, dark, rich earth left behind by the Nile's flood. But this wasn't just a poetic description of fertile land. To them, blackness meant potential, power, the beginning of all change. The land itself became a living symbol of transformation, a sacred metaphor. From this mystical soil, the word alchemy would one day emerge. But to the Egyptians, alchemy wasn't about turning base metals into gold. That obsession would only come later, long after Egypt's power waned. For them, alchemy was already everywhere. It pulsed in the rituals of mummification, where bodies were preserved and prepared for eternity. It echoed in temple chambers, where priests combined herbs, minerals, and oils into divine elixirs. It was present in the stars, in the soil, in the ovens that baked bread, and the vats that brewed beer. Transformation wasn't just a practice, it was a cosmic language spoken by the gods. And Egyptian alchemy wasn't physical alone. It was spiritual to its core. To alter something outwardly, you had to understand it inwardly. This belief would resonate across centuries in every major alchemical tradition, because to change matter, you had to first change the self. According to legend, the Egyptians were guided in these mysteries by a divine figure, Thoth, the ibis-headed, god of wisdom, writing, time, and the moon. He wasn't just a deity, he was the keeper of balance, the cosmic scribe, the silent hand behind all transformation. Some say Thoth authored thousands of texts containing the secrets of the universe. Most lost to time or perhaps never meant for mortal eyes. But one fragment of his wisdom would ripple through millennia, the fabled Emerald Tablet. This mystical object, spoken of in whispers across civilizations, was said to be inscribed in a green crystal or emerald-like stone. It contained barely more than a dozen lines, but those lines carried a weight that shook worlds. Its opening phrase became the cornerstone of Hermetic wisdom. That which is above is like that which is below, and that which is below is like that which is above. This was no idle riddle. It revealed the principle of correspondence, the idea that the heavens and the human soul, the stars and the cells, the cosmos and the crucible, all reflected one another. What happens in the sky echoes in the heart. What changes in the lab reverberates through the universe. The Emerald Tablet didn't offer recipes for gold, it offered a world view, one where nothing was fixed, everything could evolve. Everything could be purified, transmuted, lifted. It wasn't about turning lead into gold, it was about turning ignorance into understanding, disorder into harmony, mortality into transcendence. The tablet also spoke of the one thing, the primal force from which all things flow. It rises from the earth and descends from the sky, carrying with it the power to transform reality itself. Some called it the philosopher's stone, others the soul, the ether, consciousness itself. But perhaps the deepest mystery wasn't the words on the tablet, it was who could truly read them. Because this wisdom wasn't meant for mere scholars. It was reserved for seekers, those willing to burn away their illusions, to glimpse the truth beneath. And so the fire lit in Egypt by Thoth and his hidden teachings would pass like a sacred torch. Across empires, across tongues, across centuries, not as a chase for gold, but as a sacred science, a spiritual journey, a path that began not in greed, but in reverence for the transformative heart of the universe. First to Persia, then to the world. As Egypt's golden age began to dim, alchemy did not perish with its decline. It migrated, like an ember carried on the wind, leaping from one ancient culture to another. It traveled along the arteries of commerce and conquest, passed by mystics, scholars and soldiers, until it found fertile ground in the vast empire of Persia. But what took root there was not simply a transplantation of knowledge, it was a metamorphosis. In Persia, alchemy became something deeper, more contemplative, and spiritually profound. At the core of this new Persian alchemy was Zoroastrianism, one of the oldest monotheistic religions in the world. Its cosmology was steeped in duality, a relentless struggle between the forces of light and darkness, truth and deception, purity and corruption. Within this worldview, fire held supreme symbolic weight. It was not merely an element, but a sacred presence, a divine flame that illuminated temples and symbolized the very wisdom of Ahura Mazda, the supreme god. That fire, the holy fire, was more than metaphor. It lit the crucibles of early Persian alchemists who saw their experiments not just as chemical reactions, but as sacred rituals echoing cosmic battles. Yet while Persian thought gave alchemy its spiritual dimension, it was a mystic philosopher from Greco-Egyptian Alexandria who gave it voice, a voice that still resonates today. His name was Zosimos of Panopolis. Living during the 3rd or 4th century CE in Roman Egypt, Zosimos was no ordinary thinker. His texts offered meticulous descriptions of distillation apparatus, furnaces, and chemical operations. But these were woven together with haunting visionary accounts that blurred the boundary between physical and spiritual transformation. One of his most famous visions, Zosimos dreamed of being dismembered, burned and melted in an alchemical furnace. But this was not a nightmare. It was a divine revelation, a symbolic death that marked the purification of the soul. In his philosophy, the alchemist's work was not limited to transforming metals. It was about inner rebirth. Just as lead must be broken down to become gold, so too must the alchemist break down the self through suffering, discipline, and revelation to achieve spiritual enlightenment. Zosimos introduced the revolutionary idea of spiritual alchemy, a concept that would echo across cultures and centuries. His writings were filled with esoteric imagery, lions devouring serpents, humans dissolving into colorful vapors, divine beings emerging from fire. These were not chemical formulas. They were metaphors, allegories for the soul's painful yet glorious ascent toward perfection. He also emphasized that true wisdom could not be acquired passively. It wasn't something one could buy or memorize. It had to be earned through personal transformation. Through Zosimos, alchemy was no longer just an early science. It had evolved into a sacred philosophy, a mystery that united spirit and matter in a single divine quest. And as the last embers of ancient Egyptian, Greek, and Persian knowledge flickered in the shadow of a changing world, a new empire began to rise in the East, an empire that would preserve, refine, and elevate that knowledge to new heights. Under the banner of Islam, from the 8th to the 13th centuries, the Islamic world became the cradle of a vast intellectual renaissance. While Europe slipped into centuries of superstition and stagnation, cities like Baghdad, Cairo, and Cordoba became luminous centers of learning, where ancient wisdom was not just protected, it was expanded. In these vibrant metropolises, philosophy, mathematics, astronomy, and medicine flourished, and alchemy stood proudly among them. At the heart of this Islamic golden age was a man whose name would become legend, Jabir ibn Hayyan, known in the West as Geber. Far more than a chemist or philosopher, Jabir was the embodiment of both disciplines. Often called the father of chemistry, his contributions were so profound that they formed the foundation of modern science. In the 8th century, within the sophisticated courts of the Abbasid Caliphate, Jabir approached alchemy not merely as a mystical art, but as a methodical, testable science. He introduced laboratory techniques that are still used today: distillation, crystallization, sublimation. He invented new instruments, refined acids, and authored more than 100 texts, blending rational experimentation with philosophical depth. Yet despite this scientific rigor, Jabir never abandoned the spiritual roots of alchemy. To him, every material transformation mirrored a deeper transformation of the soul. The cosmos, he believed, was composed of 4 elemental substances: earth, air, fire, and water, all infused with spiritual energies. His vision of alchemy was deeply symbolic and richly layered. Jabir wove together elements of numerology, astrology, and metaphysics, creating a framework where physical balance mirrored spiritual harmony. At the core of his system was the concept of mizan, balance. Just as the body required balance to maintain health, so too did metals require balance to reach perfection. Gold, in this view, wasn't just a precious metal, it was a state of absolute equilibrium, the perfected form of matter. If balance could be carefully achieved, Jabir believed, then even the most humble base metal could be elevated. And his ideas did not remain confined to the Islamic world. Over time, Jabir's texts, translated into Latin, began circulating through medieval Europe. Western scholars absorbed his methods and insights, often unaware that the very foundations of their new alchemical systems were built atop the brilliance of a Persian mind. Through Jabir ibn Hayyan, alchemy made its most decisive leap, from sacred metaphor to systematic science. Yet it never lost its mystical essence. It remained a sacred map, one that guided both the transformation of physical matter and the refinement of the human soul. Meanwhile, as the Islamic world preserved and advanced ancient wisdom, Europe remained largely cloaked in superstition and theological rigidity. But knowledge is hard to contain. It leaks, it flows, it travels, especially when it speaks to something deeper than doctrine. Piece by piece, smuggled through language, conquest, and translation, alchemy began its slow migration westward once again. The bridges between East and West were built in places like Alexandria, Toledo, and Cordoba, great centers of translation and cross-cultural exchange. In Al-Andalus, Islamic Spain, Christian, Muslim, and Jewish scholars gathered in rare moments of unity, poring over ancient manuscripts and breathing life into forgotten ideas. Arabic translations of works by Jabir, Zosimos, and Aristotle were rendered into Latin. By the 12th century, Europe, starved for knowledge, eagerly devoured them. What returned to Europe was not just chemistry. It was alchemy in its full ancient sense, the sacred marriage of matter and meaning. Monasteries became secret havens for hidden texts. Monks experimented not only to purify metals, but to purify themselves. The obsession took root, and its name was transmutation, the idea that base metals could become gold, and that the human soul could follow a similar path from impurity to perfection. Among the most influential texts to reach Europe was the Turba Philosophorum, the Assembly of the Philosophers, a mysterious dialogue among ancient sages debating the secrets of nature. Soon followed the Picatrix, an enormous Arabic grimoire rich with astrological and alchemical imagery. These were not simple recipe books. They carried entire worldviews, ones that challenged medieval Europe's rigid religious frameworks. To avoid persecution, alchemical texts were often disguised as religious or philosophical treatises. But even under layers of metaphor, they posed a threat to the established order. If lead could become gold, what else might be possible? Could a peasant become noble? Could man approach the divine outside the gatekeeping of the church? Despite ecclesiastical suspicion, the allure of alchemy proved irresistible. It offered an alternate path to truth, one hidden from authority, one rooted in inner transformation. By the late Middle Ages, the torch had been passed. The flame that once illuminated Egyptian temples, Persian fire altars, and the laboratories of Baghdad now flickered in stone monasteries, noble castles, and underground societies of Europe. Alchemy had crossed another threshold, and it was preparing to evolve once more. No longer merely a science, no longer just a sacred art, it had become something mythic, a holy quest. And at the heart of that quest, there burned a single idea, a singular object of obsession, the philosopher's stone. It was a mystery wrapped in allegory, concealed within riddles, and veiled by a tapestry of esoteric symbols, said to possess the power to transmute base metals into gold, and to bestow immortality through the legendary elixir of life. The philosopher's stone became the most coveted object in the annals of Western esotericism. Yet for those who truly grasped the essence of alchemy, the stone was never meant to be a literal substance. It was a spiritual ideal, a symbol of inner perfection. Alchemical texts referred to it by many enigmatic names: lapis philosophorum, the red stone, the powder of projection. Some described it as a literal crimson-hued crystalline substance. Others insisted it was a metaphor for spiritual enlightenment. But in one respect, all accounts converged. The stone represented the pinnacle of transformation. Alchemists believed that the universe itself was a living, breathing entity, a grand organism forever striving toward balance and perfection. In their eyes, even metals were alive, evolving slowly within the womb of the earth. Lead in this worldview was merely immature gold, awaiting its natural metamorphosis. Just as nature sought refinement, so too could humanity. And in this quest for evolution, the philosopher's stone was the accelerant. European alchemists, like Albertus Magnus, Roger Bacon, and Paracelsus, devoted their lives to understanding the rhythms of nature in their pursuit of this ultimate truth. They constructed elaborate furnaces, mapped the heavens, collected rare minerals, and penned cryptic manuscripts filled with serpents, dragons, suns, kings, and wombs, all metaphors for the inner and outer stages of transformation. The creation of the stone was said to follow a sacred journey known as the magnum opus, the great work. It began with nigredo, the blackening, a symbolic death and dissolution of the ego. Next came albedo, the whitening, a phase of purification and clarity, then citrinitas, the yellowing, representing illumination and the dawn of wisdom. Finally, rubedo, the reddening, marked rebirth and the emergence of the stone itself. This journey was intentionally shrouded in metaphor, for true transformation, alchemists believed, was not meant for the uninitiated. Only those who were prepared intellectually and spiritually could hope to comprehend the process. For the wise, the quest for the stone was not about gold or wealth. It was a path toward the perfection of the soul. As alchemy spread throughout medieval Europe, it gradually retreated into secrecy. What had once been discussed openly in temples and academic courts now went underground. The reasons were manifold: religious persecution, political suspicion, and the increasingly obscure language that cloaked alchemical discourse. The Church, wielding immense influence, regarded alchemy with both interest and suspicion. Some Christian mystics embraced it, seeing in the transmutation of metals a symbolic parallel to Christ's resurrection. Others, however, condemned it as heresy. The notion that man could manipulate the elements or achieve spiritual ascension outside divine grace was deeply threatening. To avoid persecution, alchemists wrapped their teachings in layers of symbolism, hiding their truths behind allegory and metaphor. This ushered in an era where alchemy became the domain of secret societies, encoded texts and arcane symbols that only the enlightened few could interpret. Among them were the Rosicrucians, an enigmatic brotherhood that surfaced in the 17th century, claiming to possess ancient alchemical wisdom inherited from Egypt and Arabia. Their manifestos preached spiritual enlightenment, cosmic harmony, and hidden sciences. Though their very existence was shrouded in doubt, their ideas ignited the imaginations of countless seekers. Then came the Freemasons, born of stonecutters and builders, yet deeply infused with the language and symbolism of alchemical philosophy. Their rituals echoed with themes of purification, transformation, and the quest for inner light. Whether or not they practiced literal alchemy, the spirit of their teachings aligned with its deepest aim, the construction of the perfected self. Alchemy also found a safe haven in the so-called Books of Secrets. Works like the Mutus Liber contained no text at all, only a series of puzzling, symbolic illustrations meant to communicate the great work without revealing a single word. Other manuscripts employed what was called the green language, a form of poetic wordplay, riddles and puns used to hide deeper meanings from uninitiated eyes. The alchemist became a person of duality. Outwardly, they appeared as scholars, physicians, monks, quiet and obedient. Inwardly, they were revolutionaries, chasing the divine through flame and metal, through vision and discipline. The very secrecy that threatened to extinguish alchemy paradoxically preserved it. Like embers buried in ash, its flames smoldered in silence, passed hand to hand, generation after generation. And in that quiet, alchemy evolved, not merely as a proto-science, but as a living philosophy, one destined to face its greatest transformation yet, the birth of modern chemistry. By the 17th and 18th centuries, a quiet revolution was beginning to stir, one that would inherit the legacy of alchemy even as it dismantled it. This was the dawn of the Enlightenment, the mystical language and metaphor that once animated alchemical thought began to fall out of favor. In their place rose a new creed, empiricism, logic, and the demand for reproducible results. Alchemy's heir had arrived, and its name was chemistry. The shift was not sudden or violent, but gradual and methodical. Many of the earliest chemists were themselves alchemists. They simply altered their focus. No longer were they seeking spiritual transformation or the soul's transmutation. They sought tangible, measurable change, Gone were dragons and celestial kings, in came glassware, balances, and laboratory notebooks. The final departure came with thinkers like Robert Boyle, often hailed as the father of modern chemistry. In his 1661 book, The Skeptical Chemist, Boyle proposed that matter was composed of atoms and that chemical reactions could be explained through natural laws, without recourse to hidden forces or mystical correspondences. He didn't ridicule alchemy, but sought to strip it of its esoteric language. Boyle believed in transformation, but one that must be rooted in observable reality. Soon after, Antoine Lavoisier would revolutionize science by identifying oxygen's role in combustion and debunking the ancient belief in the four classical elements: earth, air, fire, and water. The periodic table followed. Science was now secular. Laboratories replaced lodges. The philosopher's stone gave way to the microscope, the sacred furnace to the Bunsen burner. And yet, in this transition, a paradox emerged. Chemistry owed its very birth to alchemy. The tools, the experimental spirit, the hunger to understand matter, they all came from the alchemist's crucible. Alchemy had laid the foundation upon which chemistry would be built. It had walked so chemistry could run. Still, the world was changing. The Industrial Revolution demanded results, not riddles. Funding flowed to labs, not lodges. What was once sacred had become merely material. But not all was lost. In hidden corners and within quiet minds, alchemy endured. No longer as a physical science, but as a metaphor, a symbol of transformation, of union, of the eternal dance between spirit and matter. And while the world turned its gaze to chemistry for answers, a few still looked to alchemy for meaning. For some fires, once lit, never go out. They simply smolder beneath the surface. Alchemy may have vanished from the halls of scientific inquiry, but it did not die. As it had always taught, it simply transformed. What began in the tombs of ancient Egypt, refined in the fire temples of Persia, and encrypted in the arcane texts of medieval Europe, did not disappear. It evolved. Its teachings fractured and found new homes in chemistry, psychology, medicine, and even modern spirituality. Its outer form was cast aside, but its inner message endured. In the 20th century, a new breed of alchemist emerged, not with crucibles and furnaces, but with notebooks and dreams. One of the most influential among them was Carl Jung, the Swiss psychologist who resurrected the ancient art and gave it fresh meaning. Jung proposed that the alchemists were not merely transforming metals, but mapping the human psyche, albeit unconsciously. The nigredo, he said, was depression; albedo, clarity; rubedo, the synthesis of the self; the philosopher's stone, for Jung, was the culmination of individuation, the realization of the unified whole self. Thus, alchemy was never just about gold. Its symbols found new life in self-help literature that spoke of transformation, in heroic tales of descent and rebirth, in our very vocabulary. Words like refine, distill, and purify all trace their lineage to the alchemical path. Even modern science bears its imprint. Chemists still transmute elements in nuclear reactions. Physicists discuss dark matter and unified fields with the same awe that alchemists once reserved for quintessence and ether. The search for the ultimate building blocks of reality goes on. Only the terminology has changed. But perhaps the truest legacy of alchemy lies not in any flask or formula, but in its unwavering devotion to unity. It refused to separate the spiritual from the material or the mystical from the empirical. Alchemy insisted that every transformation in the world must begin with a transformation within. Behind every experiment, it posed a sacred question. Who are you becoming in the process? In a world driven by speed, technology, and cold data, alchemy whispers an older truth, that to truly change the world, you must first be willing to change yourself. And so the alchemist's fire continues to burn, not in laboratories, but in hearts, quietly, persistently, transmuting. For alchemy was never just a science. It was and remains a mirror. And just as alchemy taught us to look beneath appearances, so too does the story now descend, quite literally, beneath the surface. For far from the world of furnaces and symbols, we arrive at a landscape that seems pulled from a dream. At first glance, Cappadocia appears like a surreal painting, its horizon punctuated by tall stone spires, undulating ridges, and valleys sculpted by the patient hands of wind and time. Tourists flock to marvel at this alien terrain, but the true wonder of Cappadocia lies not in its skyward chimneys, but far below the ground. Beneath this ancient Turkish landscape lies a forgotten world, a vast network of subterranean cities, stretching for miles. These aren't mere caves or emergency shelters. They are entire civilizations carved into the earth, complete with homes, churches, wells, granaries, livestock stables, wine presses, and even schools. Some of these cities plunge up to 18 stories deep and are believed to have housed thousands of people. Remarkably, many remained completely hidden from the modern world until the mid-20th century. In 1963, a man renovating his home in the quiet town of Derinkuyu knocked down a wall in his basement. What he discovered behind it was not brick or bedrock, but a tunnel. That tunnel led to another, then to a chamber, then to a spiraling staircase. He had, by sheer accident, unearthed the ancient entrance to one of the largest and most astonishing underground cities the world has ever known. While many of Cappadocia's underground cities were extensively expanded during the Byzantine period, archaeologists have long debated just how ancient their origins truly are. Some experts believe that the earliest layers, especially in remarkable places like Derinkuyu and Kaymakla, may stretch back far further in time, possibly as early as the Hittite Empire, or even beyond, around 2000 BCE. This land has always invited transformation, and its people responded with quiet ingenuity. They didn't shape their world with machines or great monuments above ground, but by turning inward into the earth itself. The land was more than just a foundation. It became a sanctuary, a fortress, an inverted sky carved from stone and veiled in secrets. But what exactly were these ancient people hiding from? That mystery deepens in the quiet modern town of Derinkuyu, where a chance discovery would unveil something extraordinary. Not a city standing proudly under the sun, but one buried deep beneath the soil. In 1963, a local man renovating his home knocked down a wall in his basement and stumbled upon something utterly unexpected. A narrow, dark tunnel stretching beyond the reach of light. What lay beyond would defy all expectation. That simple passageway opened into chambers, and those chambers branched into corridors. Spiral staircases wound downward into the earth, descending floor by floor until they reached depths that seemed almost impossible. Eventually, explorers stood nearly 18 stories below the surface. What they had uncovered was Derinkuyu, the largest and deepest known underground city in all of Cappadocia, and quite possibly the entire world. The sheer scale of what lay beneath was staggering. This wasn't a mere refuge or temporary shelter. Derinkuyu was a fully functioning city, carefully hewn from volcanic rock. It featured homes, churches, communal kitchens, wine and oil presses, storage rooms, stables, schools, and even a baptismal chamber. Archaeologists estimate it could support as many as 20,000 people, along with their animals and enough food and water to sustain them for months. And it wasn't built haphazardly. It was engineered with astonishing precision. Massive, circular, stone doors, shaped like giant millstones, could be rolled across passageways to seal off sections of the city in the event of an invasion. These weren't mere boulders. They were expertly carved, fitted into grooves, and positioned so they could only be moved from the inside, rendering them nearly impenetrable from without. The ventilation system was no less remarkable. Vertical, shafts extended from the lowest levels up to the surface, supplying fresh air even 60 meters below ground. Wells tapped into deep aquifers, ensuring access to clean water without needing to surface, essential during times of siege or occupation. Evidence of a sophisticated society was everywhere. There was even a mission school, complete with classrooms and study areas, indicating that this city wasn't simply a place of survival. It was a place for living, teaching, worship, and preserving a community. But the enigma of Derinkuyu only deepens the more we uncover. Despite all the discoveries, no one truly knows who first built it or why. Some scholars argue that early Christians expanded it during the 1st centuries CE, using it to escape persecution from the Romans or later, Arab invaders. Yet others believe the city's origins lie much earlier, possibly during the time of the Phrygians or Hittites, millennia before Christianity emerged. What kind of threat could drive people to such extraordinary efforts to vanish into the rock and stay there for weeks, months, perhaps even years? The city contains no inscriptions, no names, no dated carvings, just tunnels, silence, and questions. And even now, large portions remain uncharted. The deeper one ventures, the more it feels less like a human settlement and more like something otherworldly. Building downward is vastly more difficult than building up. There's no natural light, no scaffolding, no wide open sky, only stone and shadow. Yet the builders of Cappadocia's subterranean cities did not simply dig blindly. They carved and planned with meticulous intent. The layout was as methodical as it was ingenious. These were not frantic tunnels born of panic. They were layered systems, designed like concentric circles or the skin of an onion, each level serving a specific function. The upper levels housed living quarters, situated near the surface to allow swift escape or return when the threat subsided. Below them, kitchens, workshops, food storage, and livestock pens were strategically placed to minimize fire hazards and disease. The deeper levels were vital for survival, designed to function in long-term isolation. And it worked. One of the most brilliant aspects of the design was its natural ventilation. Vertical shafts carved through solid rock allowed fresh air to circulate across all 18 levels, some shafts extending over 50 meters. Their placement was so precise that even without modern technology, air could flow freely from top to bottom, using gravity and natural pressure differences. There were no fans, no electricity, just stone, patience, and brilliance. Water access was another key factor. The city was built around underground aquifers, and wells could be accessed from within. Some were even deliberately sealed off from the surface to prevent attackers from contaminating them. And beyond that, a network of communication tunnels linked Derinkuyu to neighboring sites, smaller chambers, satellite shelters, and even full-scale cities. In moments of crisis, people and messages could move beneath the surface from one underground complex to another, bypassing the dangers above. These narrow tunnels often forced travelers to move single file, another strategic design element to delay or prevent armed invaders. Hidden trapdoors, secret exits opening into valleys or dry riverbeds, and of course, the iconic rolling stone doors. All of these features suggest more than just practical foresight. They suggest fear, a deep generational fear, because every element of these cities was built not just to resist danger, but to survive in its presence for weeks, months, even years. And that leads to the question scholars have been asking for generations. What kind of threat required this scale of preparation, and is it possible it was never truly vanquished? For centuries, Cappadocia has been a crossroads of empire. The Hittites, Assyrians, Persians, Romans, Byzantines, all fought for control of this land. Later, during the early Islamic period, waves of Arab raids prompted Christian communities to take refuge underground. It's easy to assume these cities were a response to war, and in part, they were. Derinkuyu and Kaymaklu likely served as sanctuaries during violent invasions, allowing entire populations to vanish from the landscape for as long as needed. But here lies the paradox. These cities were not built in haste. They weren't thrown together in times of desperation. Their sheer size, complexity, and planning suggest a project that spanned generations, and that implies a threat that was not sudden, but constant. Some historians propose that the original builders were Hittites nearly 4,000 years ago. Others believe the Phrygians later expanded the networks, but beyond scattered artifacts and architectural similarities, there is little solid evidence. No texts, no dates, no definitive origin story. And so, the theories continue. Some believe the danger was not human at all, that these people weren't hiding from armies, but from forces of nature. Volcanic eruptions, solar flares, environmental collapse. Others explore more fringe ideas, that the underground cities were a response to something cosmic, even mythic. Ancient beings, celestial events, sky gods spoken of in legends, beings not of this world. It sounds fantastical, but the secrecy of the design fuels such speculation. Concealed air shafts, hidden escape routes, no surface markings, nothing to reveal what lay beneath. As if the builders weren't just escaping, they were erasing themselves, vanishing from sight, perhaps from memory. Whatever the truth, one fact remains. We still don't know exactly what the people of Cappadocia were hiding from, or if it worked. Because the deeper you go, the more it feels like you're not just entering a city, but a secret, one that still holds its breath. And yet, despite the depth and darkness, life here was not a prison. It was a rhythm, a culture hidden but alive. People didn't just wait for the danger to pass, they lived. Entire communities functioned underground, following routines shaped by necessity and intelligence. Families inhabited multi-room compartments. Kitchens were located on lower floors to manage smoke, with clay ovens baking bread that mingled with the scent of stone, livestock, and earth. Livestock pens, filled with goats, sheep, even chickens, were placed near entrances to facilitate airflow and ease of care. Churches and chapels stood carved from the rock, decorated with crosses and frescoes. Worship didn't stop, nor did education. Schools operated in dedicated rooms. Children learned, elders taught. The air was thin. The light came from oil lamps flickering in the gloom. Fresh water was drawn from deep aquifers. Grain was stored in sealed rock chambers. Wine and olive oil were pressed underground, hinting that life retained not just function, but flavor, ritual, and continuity. Privacy was valued. Rooms were arranged to provide families their own space, while communal areas fostered cooperation. It was not just about survival. It was about preserving a civilization, a memory, and a way of life. Wars may have raged above, but beneath the surface, people were getting married, raising children, mourning their dead, not in despair, but with purpose. Because to live underground wasn't to live in fear. It was to live with intention. And as we now know, Derinkuyu and Kaymaklu were not isolated marvels. They were part of something even grander. Beneath the volcanic valleys of Cappadocia lies a sprawling web of interconnected tunnels, passageways, and subterranean corridors that connect multiple underground cities. It's possible these sites weren't independent strongholds at all, but parts of a vast, unified civilization hidden beneath the surface. a civilization whose true story we may only just be beginning to understand. Still, even with decades of research and excavation, we have only scratched the surface of what lies beneath Cappadocia. The full scale of its underground networks remains cloaked in mystery. New passageways are still being unearthed, often by accident. In 2014, a discovery stunned even seasoned archaeologists. An enormous subterranean complex was uncovered beneath the modern-day city of Nevşehir. This newly revealed site may rival or even surpass the scale of the famous Derinkuyu complex. Early surveys suggest it could contain dozens of levels descending deep into the earth, complete with aqueducts, communal spaces, places of worship, and vast webs of uncharted tunnels. The sheer complexity of this site raises questions far beyond its architecture. What exactly were these labyrinthine cities for? Were they simply emergency hideouts, or the skeletal infrastructure of a society that chose to live beneath the surface, entirely hidden by design? As more is revealed, a pattern emerges. Cappadocia's underground world is not a scattered series of isolated chambers and shelters. It's a connected system, deliberately designed, ingeniously engineered, and purposefully concealed. Beneath the sunlit hills and whimsical rock formations lies a shadow civilization, ancient and secretive. A world not buried by erosion or disaster, but hidden with intention. Because in Cappadocia, the earth doesn't just bury secrets, it safeguards them. Despite years of study, the underground cities remain a riddle wrapped in silence. The stone walls whisper no names, no dates. And so the questions persist, not just how these places were carved, but why. And when conventional history falters, speculation rushes in to fill the silence. One of the most enduring mysteries is the age of these subterranean networks. According to traditional archaeology, many of these cities expanded during the Byzantine era, likely as Christian communities fled persecution and invading forces. But some researchers believe the oldest tunnels could predate this period by millennia, possibly reaching back over 4,000 years. If true, that means humans retreated underground not just from religious or political threats, but from something far older and possibly far more terrifying. That idea opens the door to a multitude of theories. Some propose that the cities were constructed as refugees from ancient cataclysms, massive floods, solar storms, volcanic winters, or abrupt climate collapses. The design of these cities, sealed, self-sufficient and defensible, suggests they were built for long-term survival, not just for a season, but potentially for generations. Others look to the stars for answers. Ancient astronaut theorists offer a more controversial suggestion, that early civilizations went underground to escape beings they believed were gods, entities not from this world, who descended from the skies wielding terrifying power. Could these vast networks have been humanity's shield against something truly alien? Local folklore seems to echo this fear. One legend tells of towering giants who roamed the earth, driving humanity into the depths for safety. Other stories speak of fire raining from the heavens and of invaders with burning eyes. These tales may sound fantastical today, mere myth, twisted by time, but they suggest a primal fear that once gripped entire cultures, a fear powerful enough to push them into the rock, to carve homes in the dark. Then there are symbolic interpretations. In many ancient traditions, the act of descending into the earth was not merely physical, it was spiritual, a metaphorical death followed by rebirth. Could these underground cities have been sanctuaries of transformation? Were they holy spaces for rituals, not just hiding places? Or perhaps these places were never meant to be remembered at all. Perhaps they were built to be forgotten. No single theory can capture the whole truth. The scale, the precision, the sheer ambition of these cities. None of it fits neatly into our modern understanding. And maybe that's what unsettles us most. Because what lies hidden beneath Cappadocia might not be history in the traditional sense. It may be a glimpse into something older, stranger, and intentionally obscured. Something that was never meant to be rediscovered. Today, tourists stroll through Cappadocia's whimsical landscape, through valleys carved by wind, past towering fairy chimneys glowing with the orange light of dusk. Hot air balloons drift overhead, silent sentinels of a land that feels like a dream. But beneath that beauty lies something older, something deeper. A vast, silent world carved in the dark. Visitors descend spiral staircases, pass through narrow corridors, and stand in stone chambers where people once waited, perhaps in fear, perhaps in reverence. But what they see is only a fraction. Many chambers remain sealed, some tunnels have caved in, some doorways seem to lead nowhere, or maybe somewhere we're not meant to go. These aren't simply ruins, they're monuments to human resilience, testaments carved in stone. They speak of a people determined to survive, to protect their children, to preserve their beliefs even if it meant vanishing from history. And in that act of disappearance, they left behind a kind of message, one not written in any language, but inscribed in the architecture of endurance. We don't know their names, we don't know their individual stories, but we know this. They were builders, visionaries, and survivors. They created something designed to outlast empires and outlive memory. Perhaps it was meant to remain hidden. Cappadocia reminds us that history doesn't always live in books or on battlefields. Sometimes the most profound truths are buried on purpose, tucked beneath stone, hidden from invaders, from time, and even from us. And what remains is mystery. Mystery in the flawless engineering of rolling stone doors. Mystery in the air shafts that still whisper wind from the deep. Mystery in the hundreds of unexplored tunnels still waiting in the dark. Maybe the real purpose of Cappadocia's underground cities will forever elude us. Maybe it was never ours to know. But when you walk those shadowed hallways, with the weight of the mountain pressing above and silence pressing within, you feel something ancient move, not a fear, a presence, a legacy, a memory of people who chose to endure together underground in the face of a world gone hostile. And the earth, patient and quiet, has kept their secret well. And in the ancient world, secrets weren't just kept in stone, they were also spoken in dreams. To ancient civilizations, sleep wasn't just a nightly ritual. It was a passageway into something deeper. Dreams weren't random flickers of thought or meaningless images. They were sacred messages, sometimes warnings, sometimes visions, and often communications from gods or spirits. For the ancients, the barrier between the waking and spiritual realms was thin, and sleep was the time when that barrier dissolved entirely. Dreams were powerful. They could change destinies. In the silence of night, gods could speak, spirits could visit, and futures could unfold. A king might wake from a dream and change the fate of an empire. A priest might receive a message that would alter a nation's ritual practices. Across the ancient world, from Mesopotamia to Egypt, from the temples of Greece to the highlands of Anatolia, dreams were revered. They were not illusions, they were glimpses into other realms. Dreams foretold war, warned of betrayal, revealed cures and demanded sacrifices. To ignore a dream was not just folly, it was dangerous. The dreamer was seen as more than a sleeper. They were a messenger, a vessel for truths too great for waking life. And some were believed to be chosen, prophets plucked from the ordinary by forces beyond. Entire professions emerged around the art of dream interpretation. Oracles, priests, shamans, they learned to decode the symbols of the night. A serpent might represent transformation or doom. A rising sun could mean triumph or deceit. Each image carried weight, and each culture developed its own lexicon of symbols. But across them all, the message was the same. Dreams mattered. Even today, that ancient reverence lingers. We still speak of following our dreams, of waking up to truth. But in the ancient world, dreaming was not poetic. It was sacred. Before Freud, before neuroscience, before REM cycles and sleep labs, there was only the silence of night and the belief that dreams were real, that to walk through one was to walk with gods. Among the first to record these visions were the Sumerians, who lived in Mesopotamia over 5,000 years ago. For them, dreams were divine broadcasts, complex, symbolic, and consequential. In the ruins of their cities, archaeologists have found clay tablets etched with dream records, some deeply personal, others political. Dream interpretation was no novelty. It was a science, a spiritual art. Sumerian kings kept court interpreters, wise men trained to understand the messages of the gods. Their readings could sway wars, shape laws, or crown rulers. One of the most profound glimpses into this world lies within the Epic of Gilgamesh, humanity's oldest surviving literary epic. In it, both Gilgamesh and his companion Enkidu are visited by vivid prophetic dreams, visions of celestial conflict, of mountains crumbling, of divine anger. These dreams are not dismissed. They are studied, interpreted, acted upon. The Sumerians believed in two types of dreams, those sent by the gods and those that were mere echoes of the day. Discerning which was which required a trained diviner, someone who could read the subtle signs. Temples often had special dream chambers where priests and rulers would sleep, hoping for sacred visions. This practice, known as incubation, would later appear in Egyptian, Greek, and Roman traditions. But it likely began here, with the Sumerians. Dreams could even become tools of power. A ruler who claimed to receive a divine dream gained legitimacy, authority, even fear. The gods told me in a dream was not just a spiritual claim, it was a political weapon. In the Sumerian worldview, the cosmos was alive, full of signs and meaning, and dreams were its chosen language. Every lion, every storm, every burning star carried weight. In a world where gods walked among mortals, dreaming wasn't sleeping, it was listening. To disregard one's dreams was, in the eyes of the ancients, to challenge the very will of the cosmos. For the ancient Egyptians, dreams were not mere figments of the imagination. They were divine communiques, portals into other realms, fleeting glimpses into the afterlife, and occasionally direct instructions for the waking world. In a civilization preoccupied with the idea of eternity, sleep wasn't simply rest. It was a ritual rehearsal for death itself. And dreams, they were messages carried across the veil between the living and the dead. Egyptian texts reveal that dreams were both intensely personal and deeply prophetic. Much like the Sumerians before them, Egyptians categorized dreams into two essential types: truth dreams, believed to be sent by gods, spirits, or ancestors to provide guidance, healing, or warnings, and false dreams, thought to arise from bodily imbalances or unclean spirits, leading the dreamer astray. To cultivate these divine visions, the Egyptians practiced what is now called dream incubation. Temples devoted to deities such as Serapis and Thoth opened their doors to worshippers who sought communion through dreams. Pilgrims would sleep within the temple sanctuaries, their minds primed with prayers and rituals, hoping the gods would speak to them. When they awoke, the visions they received were often recorded by temple priests, sometimes even carved into stone, preserving their significance for generations. These dreams weren't just symbolic. They were believed to have the power to heal. In some cases, the dreamer would awaken not only with divine messages, but with ailments miraculously gone. Among the most remarkable surviving artifacts from this era is the Ramses Dream Book, dating back to around 1300 BCE. This ancient papyrus scroll functions as a dream catalogue, an index of over 100 dreams alongside their interpretations. One passage explains that if a man dreams of eating crocodile meat, it means he will triumph over his enemies. Another warns that dreaming of drinking warm beer foretells sorrow and misfortune. These meanings weren't brushed aside. They were taken seriously by society's most powerful figures. Pharaohs, military leaders, and priests alike turned to dream interpreters who served as intermediaries between mortals and the divine. Maybe the real purpose of Cappadocia's underground cities will forever elude us. Maybe it was never ours to know. But when you walk those shadowed hallways, with the weight of the mountain pressing above and silence pressing within, you feel something ancient move, not a fear, a presence, a legacy, a memory of people who chose to endure together underground in the face of a world gone hostile. And the earth, patient and quiet, has kept their secret well. And in the ancient world, secrets weren't just kept in stone, they were also spoken in dreams. To ancient civilizations, sleep wasn't just a nightly ritual. It was a passageway into something deeper. Dreams weren't random flickers of thought or meaningless images. They were sacred messages, sometimes warnings, sometimes visions, and often communications from gods or spirits. For the ancients, the barrier between the waking and spiritual realms was thin, and sleep was the time when that barrier dissolved entirely. Dreams were powerful. They could change destinies. In the silence of night, gods could speak, spirits could visit, and futures could unfold. A king might wake from a dream and change the fate of an empire. A priest might receive a message that would alter a nation's ritual practices. Across the ancient world, from Mesopotamia to Egypt, from the temples of Greece to the highlands of Anatolia, dreams were revered. They were not illusions. They were glimpses into other realms. Dreams foretold war, warned of betrayal, revealed cures, and demanded sacrifices. To ignore a dream was not just folly, it was dangerous. The dreamer was seen as more than a sleeper. They were a messenger, a vessel for truths too great for waking life. And some were believed to be chosen, prophets plucked from the ordinary by forces beyond. Entire professions emerged around the art of dream interpretation. Oracles, priests, shamans, they learned to decode the symbols of the night. A serpent might represent transformation or doom. A rising sun could mean triumph or deceit. Each image carried weight, and each culture developed its own lexicon of symbols. But across them all, the message was the same. Dreams mattered. Even today, that ancient reverence lingers. We still speak of following our dreams, of waking up to truth. But in the ancient world, dreaming was not poetic. It was sacred. Before Freud, before neuroscience, before REM cycles and sleep labs, there was only the silence of night and the belief that dreams were real. That to walk through one was to walk with gods. Among the first to record these visions were the Sumerians, who lived in Mesopotamia over 5,000 years ago. For them, dreams were divine broadcasts, complex, symbolic, and consequential. In the ruins of their cities, archaeologists have found clay tablets etched with dream records, some deeply personal, others political. Dream interpretation was no novelty. It was a science, a spiritual art. Sumerian kings kept court interpreters, wise men trained to understand the messages of the gods. Their readings could sway wars, shape laws, or crown rulers. One of the most profound glimpses into this world lies within the Epic of Gilgamesh, humanity's oldest surviving literary epic. In it, both Gilgamesh and his companion Enkidu are visited by vivid prophetic dreams, visions of celestial conflict, of mountains crumbling, of divine anger. These dreams are not dismissed. They are studied, interpreted, acted upon. The Sumerians believed in two types of dreams, those sent by the gods and those that were mere echoes of the day. Discerning which was which required a trained diviner, someone who could read the subtle signs. Temples often had special dream chambers where priests and rulers would sleep, hoping for sacred visions. This practice, known as incubation, would later appear in Egyptian, Greek, and Roman traditions. But it likely began here with the Sumerians. Dreams could even become tools of power. A ruler who claimed to receive a divine dream gained legitimacy, authority, even fear. The gods told me in a dream was not just a spiritual claim, it was a political weapon. In the Sumerian worldview, the cosmos was alive, full of signs and meaning. And dreams were its chosen language. Every lion, every storm, every burning star carried weight. In a world where gods walked among mortals, dreaming wasn't sleeping, it was listening. To disregard one's dreams was, in the eyes of the ancients, to challenge the very will of the cosmos. For the ancient Egyptians, dreams were not mere figments of the imagination. They were divine communiques, portals into other realms, fleeting glimpses into the afterlife, and occasionally direct instructions for the waking world. In a civilization preoccupied with the idea of eternity, sleep wasn't simply rest. It was a ritual rehearsal for death itself. And dreams? They were messages carried across the veil between the living and the dead. Egyptian texts reveal that dreams were both intensely personal and deeply prophetic. Much like the Sumerians before them, Egyptians categorized dreams into two essential types: truth dreams, believed to be sent by gods, spirits, or ancestors to provide guidance, healing, or warnings, and false dreams, thought to arise from bodily imbalances or unclean spirits, leading the dreamer astray. To cultivate these divine visions, the Egyptians practiced what is now called dream incubation. Temples devoted to deities such as Serapis and Thoth opened their doors to worshippers who sought communion through dreams. Pilgrims would sleep within the temple sanctuaries, their minds primed with prayers and rituals, hoping the gods would speak to them. When they awoke, the visions they received were often recorded by temple priests, sometimes even carved into stone, preserving their significance for generations. These dreams weren't just symbolic. They were believed to have the power to heal. In some cases, the dreamer would awaken not only with divine messages, but with ailments miraculously gone. Among the most remarkable surviving artifacts from this era is the Ramses Dream Book, dating back to around 1300 BCE. This ancient papyrus scroll functions as a dream catalogue, an index of over 100 dreams alongside their interpretations. One passage explains that if a man dreams of eating crocodile meat, it means he will triumph over his enemies. Another warns that dreaming of drinking warm beer foretells sorrow and misfortune. These meanings weren't brushed aside. They were taken seriously by society's most powerful figures. Pharaohs, military leaders, and priests alike turned to dream interpreters who served as intermediaries between mortals and the divine. In Egyptian cosmology, dreams were intimately tied to the ka, the soul or spiritual double of a person. It was believed that during sleep, the ka would leave the body and journey through other realms, returning with visions that took shape as dreams. These experiences could bring comforting visits from deceased loved ones, encounters with gods offering guidance, or in darker cases, attacks from malevolent spirits. To ward off harmful dreams, protective spells and amulets were often employed. Dreams were not confined to private life either. They adorned tomb inscriptions, where kings described how gods visited them by night, offering counsel, prophecies, and divine approval of their rule. In a land defined by monumental pyramids and immortal deities, dreams were not illusions to be dismissed. They were revelations to be honored. To dream in ancient Egypt was to brush against the eternal. This reverence for dreams didn't fade with time. As we move forward through the cradle of civilization, we find that in ancient Greece, dreams remained profound, though the Greeks added new layers of meaning. For them, dreams inhabited a space between divine myth, practical medicine, and burgeoning philosophy. They believed dreams were not only messages from the gods or heroic spirits, but potentially reflections of the soul itself. While the Egyptians saw dreams as divine edicts, the Greeks began to ask a more subtle question: why do we dream at all? One of the most revered sites for dream revelation was the Asclepieion, a healing temple dedicated to Asclepius, the god of medicine and miraculous recovery. These temples were scattered across the Mediterranean world, but none more famous than the sanctuary at Epidaurus. Pilgrims traveled great distances, seeking cures not through potions or surgeries, but through sacred sleep. The ritual, known as incubation, required purification of both body and spirit. Worshippers would bathe, fast, pray, and sometimes offer sacrifices before laying themselves down to sleep within the temple's inner sanctum. It was in this state, prepared, pure, and open, that many claimed to dream of Asclepius himself. He would appear in their dreams, diagnosing their illnesses, prescribing remedies, or even performing dream surgery. Temple priests, known as therapeuti, served as both interpreters and healers, listening to these nocturnal visions and determining the appropriate course of action. Sometimes this involved herbal treatments or rituals. In other cases, simply having the dream was enough. The healing had already occurred. The walls of these sanctuaries were covered in inscriptions from grateful pilgrims, thanking the gods for restored sight, mended limbs, or relief from chronic pain. Whether psychosomatic or divinely orchestrated, these healings reinforced the belief that dreams were gateways to a higher power. But the Greeks didn't restrict dreams to medicine alone. They also played crucial roles in politics and prophecy. In Homer's Iliad, Zeus himself sends a deceptive dream to Agamemnon to manipulate the course of war. In the Odyssey, Penelope speaks of two gates from which dreams emerge, one of horn, which delivers truth, and one of ivory, which brings lies. The Greeks took these ideas seriously. Dream interpretation became a respected discipline. Philosophers, like Heraclitus and Aristotle, debated the origins and meanings of dreams. Were they divine in nature, or simply echoes of our inner psyche? In the 2nd century CE, a man named Artemidorus of Daldis wrote the Oneirocritica, a monumental 5-volume work on dream interpretation. His method was analytical, cataloguing dreams based on profession, gender, and social status. A dream of flight might mean different things for a soldier than for a merchant. His work became a reference point across the ancient world and beyond. 2. The Greeks. Dreaming was not a trivial act. It was a liminal experience, one in which the soul loosened its grip on the body and momentarily floated in a realm of deeper truths. Regardless of whether a dream was divine in origin or born of human emotion, it was never meaningless. To dream was to commune with the cosmos itself. Throughout the ancient world, dreams were often seen as windows into the future. Many civilizations believed that sleep allowed the barriers of time to dissolve, letting the future bleed into the present. This vision was empowering, but also daunting. A dream could grant glimpses of fate, but interpreting that glimpse correctly was a matter of survival. Across Sumer, Egypt, and Greece, history is filled with tales of rulers and prophets who acted on dream omens. In Mesopotamia, dreams of celestial anomalies, eclipses, falling stars, blood-colored rivers were meticulously recorded. These visions were not ignored. They were analyzed by priestly scholars who searched for repeating patterns. If war or famine loomed on the horizon, the signs could often be found in dreams. The Egyptians believed the same. Pharaoh Thutmose IV famously claimed that his destiny to rule was revealed in a dream in which the great Sphinx spoke to him, demanding that he clear away the encroaching sand. Whether this was a genuine vision or clever political propaganda, it solidified his legitimacy in the public eye. The Greeks brought this prophetic view of dreams into their political and military strategies. Before major campaigns, generals consulted oracles and underwent dream incubation to seek divine signs. Alexander the Great, for example, was said to have dreamed of the god Serapis before his conquest of Persia, a vision he took as divine endorsement of his ambition. But prophecy wasn't reserved for royalty. Common people, too, looked to dreams for omens about marriage, childbirth, health, and death. Artemidorus's Onerocritica included thousands of such everyday interpretations. Dreaming of losing one's teeth might signal the death of a relative. Dreaming of flying could mean sudden wealth or equally sudden ruin. Dreams gave the common man a rare connection to the divine, a thread of insight into destiny. But that thread was fragile. What if you misunderstood the message? What if you missed a sign? In such a world, sleep wasn't a passive act. It was a dialogue with the unknown. And that conversation could alter lives. Beyond prophecy and philosophy, dreams also became a source of healing. Ancient cultures developed sacred dream temples, places not only for prayer and introspection, but for physical and spiritual recovery. The most renowned of these, again, were the Asclepiae in Greece, but the concept was far older and more widespread. Temples in Egypt and Mesopotamia also practiced dream-based healing long before the Greeks formalized it. In these sanctuaries, the sick came not to escape pain, but to confront it through divine engagement. The process of incubation was a ritualized initiation. Fasting, bathing, prayer, and sometimes offerings prepared the body and soul. Only then would the dreamer lie down in the temple's sacred chamber, hoping to receive a vision from the gods. And many did. Some dreamed of serpents slithering across their bodies, sacred symbols of Asclepius. Others were bathed in celestial light or touched by divine hands. These dreams were not just experiences, they were treatments. Upon waking, temple priests would listen carefully, interpret the vision, and prescribe rituals or remedies. Sometimes the dream itself was considered sufficient. The healing was already complete. These healing temples were not secretive outposts. They were centers of belief visited by thousands. Stone inscriptions still survive, carved into the walls of sanctuaries, testifying to miraculous recoveries, blindness reversed, fevers broken, limbs restored. Whether these were physical cures, psychosomatic responses, or spiritual awakenings, one thing remains clear. The power of belief and the dream was immense. And across cultures and centuries, that belief endured. In ancient Egypt, pilgrims seeking healing or insight would journey to the temples of Serapis or the deified Imhotep. There in sacred chambers, they would lie down in hopes that the gods would visit them in dreams. In neighboring Mesopotamia, those suffering or searching for meaning flocked to the temples of Gula, the revered goddess of healing. These spaces were more than places of worship. They were sanctuaries for ritual sleep, where the boundary between body and spirit seemed to thin. In both lands and across countless others, people sought more than medicine. They sought messages from beyond. What connected all of these practices, from the banks of the Nile to the ziggurats of Babylon, was a profound and shared belief. The soul and the body were not separate, but entwined. And when the body rested, the soul could speak, Dreams in this worldview were not fleeting illusions or mental noise. They were sacred messages, offering guidance, comfort, or warning. Healing was not limited to wounds of the flesh. True healing came when the body was aligned with the divine. In these hushed temple chambers, dreams were not simply stories, they were medicine. In the ancient world, dreams were never just dreams. They were passages, gateways to deeper truths, to prophesy, to heal, and even to commune with the dead. Many ancient cultures believed that dreams offered a rare and sacred moment when the veil separating the living from the departed grew thin. To dream of someone who had passed away wasn't seen as a mere act of memory or longing. It was often regarded as an actual visitation, a spiritual return from the realm of the dead, bringing messages, warnings, or unresolved emotions. This belief was especially powerful in Egypt, a civilization where the afterlife was not just a belief, but a cornerstone of existence. Egyptians held that the ka, or life force of a person, could roam during sleep, visiting both the living and the dead. A dream encounter with a deceased family member wasn't taken lightly. It might mean that the dead were dissatisfied, yearning for offerings, or simply reaching out to offer protection. In response, the living would sometimes compose letters to the dead, carefully written pleas left in tombs or shrines, hoping their dreams might carry those messages across the divide. In Mesopotamia, dream visitations were approached with a mixture of reverence and caution. The dead were thought to retain influence beyond the grave, and their appearance in a dream could signify that something was amiss. Perhaps a burial ritual had been neglected, or a vow had been broken. These nocturnal visitations often prompted ritual cleansings, prayers, or offerings, all attempts to restore balance between the worlds of the living and the dead. The Greeks, too, understood the gravity of dreams involving the departed. In Homer's Odyssey, Odysseus journeys into the underworld, where he speaks to the shades of the fallen, an act that closely mirrors how many Greeks viewed the dreaming state. The philosopher Heraclitus once said, "The waking have one world in common, but the sleeping turn aside each into a world of his own." In that private world, beyond the reach of daylight and reason, the dead could sometimes slip through. And this idea wasn't unique to the ancient Mediterranean or Middle East. Far beyond those lands, cultures around the world believed the dead were never fully gone, and that dreams were their chosen language. When the voice of a lost mother, father, or child whispered in the dark of night, it wasn't interpreted as metaphor. It was reality. For ancient people, sleep wasn't a place to forget. It was where the past could speak, where love, grief, and unfinished stories could return to be felt again. But these dreams weren't always easy to understand. To the ancients, dreams were not random flickers of thought, but intricate puzzles filled with meaning. Strange beasts, surreal events, celestial omens, they were all part of a divine code. Interpreting these messages required more than intuition. It required skill, study, and ritual discipline. In civilizations like Mesopotamia, Egypt, and Greece, dream interpreters held a respected role, functioning almost like priests or shamans. They memorized vast catalogs of symbols, studied dream archives inscribed on clay or papyrus, and learned how to distinguish a divine dream from a meaningless one. Their interpretations held weight, not just in personal lives, but in matters of state. A ruler's dream could shift a kingdom's military strategy or dictate a city's harvest rituals. Certain symbols appeared time and again across cultures, but their meanings were rarely straightforward. A serpent might be a symbol of danger, healing, or transformation, depending on the context. Fire could foretell destruction or signal a spiritual rebirth. Dreams of flight might suggest a longing to escape or the liberation of the soul from its earthly cage. In ancient Egypt, detailed dream books catalogued hundreds of such signs. Dreaming of drowning might signal emotional turmoil ahead. Seeing oneself blind might represent either a painful truth coming into focus or a moment of spiritual awakening. These weren't idle guesses. They were part of a highly refined symbolic system passed down and perfected across generations. In Greece, the philosopher and dream analyst Artemidorus of Daldis compiled one of history's most influential dream manuals, Oneirocritica, a 5-volume compendium of dream analysis. Artemidorus made a strikingly modern point. The meaning of a dream depended on the dreamer. The same dream could carry vastly different messages depending on one's background, profession, or personal life. A farmer dreaming of a flood might anticipate disaster. A sailor dreaming the same might see it as a blessing. Context was everything. Dreams in this world were not isolated from other forms of divination. They were threads in a vast web of omens, signs, and sacred messages. To understand them fully, dreamers might consult oracles, perform sacrifices, or draw lots. Some kept dream journals, etched carefully in stone or inked on scrolls, to preserve these messages not just for themselves, but for their community. Each symbol was a key, part of an ancient and sacred language whispered by the gods while the world slept. To interpret a dream was to decode the divine. To understand it meant to unlock the will of the cosmos, the path of destiny, and the secrets of the soul. In the eyes of the ancients, a dream wasn't a fleeting image. It was a message in disguise, sent from the stars, the gods, or the dead. Today, we often dismiss our dreams as strange, forgettable fragments, fleeting moments lost with the sunrise. If we think about them at all, it's often through the lens of psychology or art. But for ancient civilizations, dreams were far more than nocturnal curiosities. They were sacred, deliberate, and deeply respected. Dreams served as portals to healing, to divine wisdom, and to the world of the dead. So what changed? As rationalism and scientific thinking rose, particularly in the post-Enlightenment West, dreams were reclassified. What was once seen as a divine message was now explained in terms of neurons and memory. Dreams became the result of chemical signals, electrical impulses, and the sorting of past experiences. The sacred became clinical. The symbolic was flattened into science. And yet even today, dreams still hold power. In times of grief, change, or uncertainty, people still turn inward. We still wake from vivid dreams wondering what they meant. A dream of a lost loved one can offer peace. A recurring nightmare might reveal buried anxiety. Modern psychology, from Freud's symbolic analysis to Jung's concept of the collective unconscious, has tried to recover some of that ancient insight. While we may not speak of gods anymore, we still believe dreams can matter. The ancients understood something we've nearly forgotten, that the dream world is not separate from waking life. It's a mirror, a place where not just our fears and longings are reflected, but something greater. Whether it was a whisper from a god, a warning of tomorrow's misfortune, or the quiet voice of a long-buried parent, dreams gave people access to what society could not, a direct conversation with the unknown. Perhaps that's what we've lost, not belief, but humility, the willingness to listen when sleep speaks. Across millennia and continents, one truth echoed: dreams are not chaos. They are doorways, and the real question isn't whether they're real, it's whether we're brave enough to step through. In every ancient scroll, every temple inscription, every whispered myth, we find the same message: pay attention. Close your eyes, not to escape the world, but to understand it better. Because in the quiet of night, when the noise of the world fades away, we might just hear what the Sumerians, Egyptians, and Greeks already knew: that dreams are not mere echoes of the brain. They are the voice of the soul.